welcome to the U.S. Integrated Reporting Community. And we're here in Boston today with Richard Howitt and Bob Laux, and really excited to have them. We just had a great lunch with a bunch of folks here in Boston, and now we said that we wanted to take advantage of them being here, so we thought we'd do it all again and chat a little bit with you. We're going to hear some history from Richard and a report. As if you follow him, you know that he's all over the world, and you know, he has a great perspective on what's going on. And then Bob will talk about his perspective here in the U.S. and what we're doing. My name is Mary Adams. I'm with Smarter Companies, and I'm a real believer in integrated reporting because I've been using the multi-capital model for many, many years. And that's how I first met Bob and Ken Jarbo, who's on the line. Ken, we're really excited to have you here. Together we decided, after Bob was named the U.S. lead, to start this community, and all of our meetings have been virtual up till now, and we have a couple really interesting ones coming up as well. But you know, check out the website. Please let us know as you have other ideas. We also have Elizabeth Castillo on the line, and after you guys talk, we'll talk a little bit about the project that we started with Elizabeth and Sean Stein-Smith. And before we jump into the program, we actually have sponsors this time. You saw it on the splash screen as we were getting started. SustainServe, which, do we have somebody from SustainServe on the line?
Hi, Mary. This is Ashin Finsay from SustainServe.
Oh, great. Welcome. So SustainServe was our sponsor for the day, and we had a great lunch, as I mentioned. But Ashin, if you want to just talk for a couple of minutes about what you guys have been doing in the field.
Absolutely. Thanks for the invitation, for the opportunity to sponsor. So by brief way of introduction, SustainServe is a global consultancy with offices in Boston and Zurich, Switzerland. And we do sustainability strategy and other various things that fall under that, strategy, communications, and metrics, including things like materiality and reporting. And we've got some deep experience in doing integrated reporting, and are strong believers and supporters of the integrated reporting movement. So we've recently published our 5th integrated report for one of our clients, for various clients. And one of the things that we've been thinking a lot about, and I hope this can be included in the discussion today as well, is how do we leverage integrated reporting and move that towards integrated management? Certainly, I've in previous roles, my previous roles in corporate sustainability, we've seen a spectrum of ways of doing integrated reporting, ranging from, you know, literally cutting and pasting your corporate responsibility report into your annual report and calling it an integrated report. I mean, I won't name any names, but I've been privy to that in my sordid past. You know, from that to moving towards true integrated management. And I think the keystone there is developing, as part of your annual reporting process, the tools to do the full financial, economic, and social management of material issues. And so if the efforts that are undertaken to do, for example, a sustainability materiality, are linked to the efforts to do your typical company's materiality that might go into the 10K or other financial documentation, that's when truly integrated reporting drives combined management and a combined sense of what is crucial to long-term value creation for the business. So what I'm going to be looking for today, and one of the reasons that we're really excited to be part of this movement, is let's define and unite on how we measure on integrated reporting, but always with an eye towards how do we drive and unite the processes to actually make decisions based on what's best for the financial, social, and environmental combined capital of all of our stakeholders.
Great. Thank you so much, and thanks for your support of the community. It's great there to have you as a sponsor for our day today. I also wanted to make a brief shout out to Kite Global Advisors, who have been helping us from the beginning. They write the blog posts, and they're writing up a summary of our luncheon today, and maybe use this recording as well. So, and I want to tell people that we are recording this. I'm not sure whether what we're going to do with the recording. We probably won't put the whole thing up, but we have this opportunity to get some great sound bites. So, without further ado, I'm not really making any formal introductions. I think most people know who you guys are, but we're really excited to have Richard here, and I've asked him to just kind of give his big picture perspective on where the movement came from, where it is, where we're going, and then Bob can talk a little bit about the U.S., and then really we want to then, maybe that takes 20 minutes, and then talk for half an hour, because it's always interesting to hear what other people have to say.
Okay, well, firstly, good afternoon, good day. Thank you very much for joining this. And I'm absolutely astounded and delighted that the US community is working. It was definitely something that we needed to happen in the United States, a network of practitioners coming together, learning from each other, but also brainstorming with us, feeding back to us. So Bob and yourself, Mary, but also the others that are behind this. Thank you so much for making that happen. And it's really given us a footprint and a foothold within the US market that a year ago we didn't have. And it's not the only stuff that we're doing here by a long way. We've got some big support from the US from the start in the International Integrated Reporting Council, obviously the two American-based accountancy federations, AICPA and IMA, a huge supporter of integrated reporting. Both BlackRock and Rockefeller have been big investor supporters of integrated reporting. We've had some big name US corporates like PepsiCo who were pilot companies right from the start. So this is not something which is new, but in terms of a strategy that will really see the momentum build here in the US market, I think we've made huge strides in the last year. And I think this community, and also I will just say my colleague Bob Laux has done a fantastic job coming from Microsoft, another pilot company that really helped forge this, but now we've poached him and he's leading our US program. Absolutely fantastic. So I will just say this, and thank you everyone for it. I'm also acutely aware that many of you will know a lot about the history and the content of integrated reporting, so I will do it fairly briefly. The history, of course, it grew up over a sort of 10-year period between 2000 and 2010, particularly in His Royal Highness Prince of Wales Accounting for Sustainability Forum, which was not just UK-based, that was inviting accountants and CFOs from companies from throughout the world to say, look, you're getting this valuation wrong, and the world as it is will not be as it should be unless accountancy and financial reporting changes. And there are a lot of very important discussions took place in that context. It also took place within the financial reporting and accountancy profession itself, who recognised with the growth of intangibles and work that you yourself, Mary, have been involved with over many years, that the valuations were increasingly losing relevance and not capturing the book value, was not capturing the true value of the company, and things had to change. And that was a big strand behind this. And then, of course, the financial crisis of 2008-9 hit, and all of us learned a very deep lesson about the dangers of chronic short-termism and how in a new economy of globalized economy of long supply chains, deep interdependencies, and the idea that you could just pass off risks somewhere else and it didn't have an impact back on the company was something that just had to be thrown out of the window. And so it was in 2010 that some very leading people from business, from investment and from the regulatory world came together and said we are going to form a global council to try and change corporate reporting in the world to be integrated reporting, to shift to the long term and to shift to what became called a multi-capital perspective in terms of understanding the economy which we're all undertaking. For 3 years, the companies that were pilots forged the practice, literally starting from a blank sheet of paper, and at the same time a working group that you yourself, Bob, served on, actually forged the International Integrated Reporting IR framework, a set of principles that inform that reporting and inform the change of reporting that we want to see in the reporting system of the world. And the good news in 2018 is that from those 160 pilot companies in 2013, now less than 5 years later, that is now 1,600 in 62 different countries of the world. It's already the leading practice in Japan. The financial regulator in India has asked the top 500 listed companies in that country to undertake integrated reporting. In Malaysia, 30 of the biggest companies together came out to commit to adopting integrated reporting. In China, it's been adopted by the Ministry of Finance of China, put in their 5-year plan. And this year we're setting up a pilot group of integrated reporting companies within that country. Within Europe, the strategic report in the UK has been said by the financial regulator there, the Financial Reporting Council, to be closely aligned to integrated reporting, and their chief executive has said it's the UK implementation of integrated reporting. Across the rest of Europe, the Europe's non-financial reporting initiative has said that integrated reporting fully complies with that initiative, and this year between 10 and 12,000 different companies are going to be producing non-financial information for the first time. Many of those will be using an integrated reporting framework or referencing. Majority, I think, but it will be a huge step forward given the size of that initiative within Europe. In that requirement of the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, and so it's the leading practice in that country as well. But with the support of the World Bank, we now have an integrated reporting committee to develop it across 10 African countries, literally from Morocco on the north of the continent right down to Cape Town in South Africa at its southernmost point. And here in the Americas, not only did we have that strong support for integrated reporting from the start, we now have a strategy to roll it out. Bob will talk about that in a few moments. But across Latin America, in Brazil, our sponsor is the National Development Bank of Brazil, BNDES. We have the European Integrated Reporting Commission in Brazil of some 500. It's a real hotspot, and also a hotspot in Argentina as well, with plans to develop it further there. And so I hope that shows that there is real global momentum behind this. We don't want it to be IIRC be setting itself up as some sort of institution or standard setter. We don't do that. We don't prescribe. We want to be there for as short a time as possible to advocate and provide thought leadership. So this becomes something that's not just adopted by individual companies and other organisations, but something that is part of system change in the corporate reporting system in the world. And then we don't want it to be integrated reporting. We want it to be reporting, and we do ourselves out of business. That is our mission and our vision. And therefore, the change we want is also about getting endorsement, support, and convergence with capital market operators at the national and at the international level. I've talked about support from stock exchanges, which has been crucial to our advancement. We've got big support amongst those working with boards in the field of corporate governance. Many are saying that integrated reporting is a good principle only as explicit inclusion of integrated reporting part of the corporate governance codes in many countries, from the Philippines to Malaysia to Japan to South Africa. But it's part of the International Corporate Governance Network global corporate governance principles from last year, which will see that emerge in many countries in the years to follow as well. And we've seen support in many of the international institutions by the G20 governments, and the International Integrated Reporting Council is a member of the B20 group of international business leaders that advise those G20 governments. From the OECD, whose Responsible Business Conduct Working Party has advocated integrated reporting, to the United Nations system itself, and of course Target 12.6, the Sustainable Development Goals of the UN, is to integrate sustainability in corporate reporting. And in the preamble to the 2015 Development Agenda document of the UN that set up the SDGs, it says that the integration of the SDGs is of crucial importance. So the advocacy for this has reached a very high level. And of course, within the Global Council itself, we have the World Bank, we have the World Economic Forum, we have UNCTAD. So the major interests in the world are advancing this cause, and we are well on our way to achieving our mission of making integrated reporting the norm for company reporting in the world. But that, for the world, very importantly includes the most important economy of the world, the United States. Bob.
Yeah, thank you, Richard, and thank you, Mary, and thank everybody for joining us. This the U.S. community is very important to us. We kind of think of it as a bottoms-up way of getting excitement in the U.S. What I wanted to share with you and get your feedback and thoughts in particular is what I think I'm seeing or feeling in the U.S. community. And I had the distinct pleasure of going to a meeting that was sponsored by a group called FCLT Global. It was a meeting in New York. That stands for Financial Capital on the Long Term, of looking at long-termism. And it was just a great meeting to go to. I see that James is on the line, and Larry Fink was with us. We had Randall Stevenson from AT&T, Andrew Livernis, if I pronounce his last name, from Dow DuPont. And it was showing that the high-level influencers were really talking about long-termism and the focus on long-term, and that made quite an impression on me. And I'd like to get your feedback, but what I'm thinking of the way that the U.S. market is occurring is, I kind of think it in this three-tier type of way, and there's probably a better way of thinking about this or portraying it. At the top tier, I believe, is this move to long-termism that we hear, and we hear from State Street, we hear from Larry at BlackRock, and a real move that we need to focus our capital on the longer term. And I think there's massive agreement on that, and then it's just going about that and changing our day-to-day aspects of that, and getting off what I would call, when I worked at Microsoft, the quarterly hamster wheel that we got caught on continuously and could never quite get off. And I may be wrong, but I see a push by very influential people, be it leaders of large investments, companies like BlackRock or State Street, whoever, or large companies like AT&T, Unilever, Dow DuPont, CEOs saying there's got to be a better way to do this. And you know, how have we gotten caught in this trap for so many years of short-termism and trying to meet analyst consensus, and trying to meet analyst consensus by a penny. So I think there's a real movement there, and at that level, there's a lot going on. It could be advice to get rid of quarterly earnings release. It could be advice of what should be the mandate between asset managers and asset owners. What should the asset owners mandate to the asset managers about how they should invest their funds? It could be executive compensation that we're looking at. It could be the way the board looks at long-term aspects, governance, thinking about risks. So I think that's a higher level. And one of the aspects in that higher level is reporting. And that's where I get to my second level, which is, I think we're uniquely positioned as maybe the answer there, integrated reporting of this aspect of the reporting tier of that, the reporting aspect of that, the top tier of thinking of integrated reporting, and that's really, I'll say, a multi-capital approach, but the real right word to say is multi-capitalism, and companies in employing multi-capitalism in their thought process of business decision-making and thinking about the long term in a multi-capital aspect, and then maybe the reporting will follow from that. And then the third level, I would say, is all those groups out there that are doing key performance indicators in the various capitals. It could be the environmental space, could be other spaces, and they're key. But that's the way I kind of think about this movement could really take off, and is a holistic thought process. And I kind of believe where in the United States, integrated reporting fits nicely in really helping out on the reporting aspect of shifting our focus in business and reporting on a long-term nature and all the benefits that brings. I'll just say a few of the things that we're working on in the U.S. is one item we're working on, I'm very excited about, is we're partnering with EY, Ernst & Young, and we're going to be doing an initiative called the Hidden Capitals Initiative, where we're going to be focusing on intellectual capital, human capital, and relationship capital. And we're going to start that with the Silicon Valley firms, and E&Y is helpful because they have a close relationship with a lot of the Silicon Valley firms, the Apples, the Facebooks, Oracles, Alphabet, hopefully Microsoft, Amazon. And I've always, what got me on the integrated reporting movement, and glad to see Ken, an old friend, and especially Mary that we've known for over a decade, is the intellectual capital aspect. That's my passion. And I thought that Microsoft, I think Microsoft really is intellectual capital, human capital, relationship capital. That is Microsoft. We hardly talked about it. I would say 1% at most, maybe 5%, but I'll just say 1% or most of our external reporting or communication was about those hidden capitals. So that was a disconnect. But I think the more disconnect was how great a company Microsoft, and how much I love Microsoft, is I think we left value on the table. Because I just think we didn't think systematically about those hidden capitals, and that's what we're trying to do in this project. What we're going to do is a three-prong approach. We're going to try and see what is the current state of play in those capitals, the hidden capitals. What the second one will be, what is the best practices? We'll talk a lot with the companies. We're trying to get people from the strategy groups of these companies to try and help us understand what may be the best practices. And then the third, when we get there, is to then communicate those best practices to the entire community about how to get this long-term thinking embedded into companies and the business decision-making. And I think once we get there, reporting will just follow. And the great thing about that is that companies will actually, if we're at that point, be able to report on the way they actually manage their business. You may know I'm an accountant by background and was responsible for Microsoft's 10K and 10Q. I can give you some comfort. We did not run Microsoft based on what was in those filings. We probably did the exact opposite, to tell you the truth. The second one I'm really happy about is this community, and kudos to Mary Adams for really starting it. And I'm less excited and more fulfilled about what we've been able to do here and have you participate. We had a lunch meeting here in Boston that was very well attended, and so I'm very excited. I think our next step, and that's all of us, is usually on these calls we have about 20 people, and I may be a bit pejorative, and not pejorative is not right, but a little bit of biased, and I think these are really great meetings over an hour. I think they're outstanding, and I think they should have at least 100 people actually watching them. So I think that's our next goal, and I think all of us have to do that, is to communicate that hopefully we're giving you some benefit for this hour and getting your feedback, and we're really accomplishing something here. And I'll just leave with you is I'll be back in the East Coast next week. On Tuesday, we have a meeting at the conference board, and the conference board is actually starting a integrated reporting working group. And I'm excited about that. I was a little surprised as wow, the conference board's looking at this. And I was surprised from two aspects. One, How I got involved with that was a heads up from a woman called Mary Morris at CalSTRS. And so CalSTRS is involved, and of course with the conference board, there's companies involved. So I think there's going to be great conversations at a group like the conference board with all the research and convening they do. I'm very excited about that. So I just wanted to share those three specific things that are going to the U.S. More importantly to me is, do you think that is the state of play? Is the long-termism issue really the issue driving the capital markets that we should go towards it? Any other suggestions or discussions we want to have? That's really the purpose of this, is more of us to hear from you, and it's just for us to just give a brief background. So Mary, let me turn it back over to you.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you to you both. I think it was great to kind of put some context to it. We can talk in a minute about this other initiative we have well, why don't I just jump in and just share with people, because if anybody's interested, you can see Elizabeth Castillo's here. Elizabeth, I don't know if you want to unmute. We developed with Sean Stein-Smith and Bob, but we welcome other participants. We're trying to come up with a really simple rubric for identifying the stages of integrated reporting so that we can expand the list that we have on our website to say who's doing it in the U.S. and to what extent. And so Elizabeth just kicked off a project with some of her students. So.
Yes, so I'm an assistant professor at Arizona State University in the College of Integrative Sciences and Arts, and I'm teaching a resource allocation class, which historically has been taught only about financial capital allocation, and I've adapted it to a multiple capitals perspective. And my students are for their final project, we'll be looking at annual reports and analyzing them through the lens of the integrative reporting to see how they fit in with IIR's framework. And so I'll know more at the end of May when they're done with their projects.
Great, thanks Elizabeth. Thank you she just kind of jumped in and said, hey, I'll try it with my class. So we'll continue to work on this and share as it goes along, but we hope to get others involved. An interesting note, and we will be talking with Mike Cruz on our program next month. I don't know if any of you saw, but he and Bob Eccles just did an experiment where they created a report for ExxonMobil just based on public information. And so Mike's going to be talking about that and sharing what he did and his views on it. But the thing that really blew me away was that when as a footnote in their report, where they cited how many American companies were doing integrated reporting, they referred to our community. So we owe it to everybody to do as good a job as we can to try and identify who are these companies and what is, where are they along the journey. So that's something where we totally invite participation. And then, I see it, we've mentioned Ken. I don't know if Ken, we want to get to questions, but I also, there are a lot of old friends and faces. Paul was at our lunch. Nick Shepard, I've actually worked with you on different things over the years, and Nick's in Canada, so we're doing the North America thing. So, but love to hear from all of you, thoughts, and Bob kind of put some ideas out about where are we and what should we be doing next. So,
well, Mary, since you mentioned me, I'll jump in.
Hi.
Hi. Sorry I didn't respond earlier. I was having problems with my mic through the computer, and I had to switch to the phone here. So I hope you can hear me okay.
Yes, it's great. Thanks, Ken.
Great. Thanks. Yeah, thanks for doing this. I've been kind of away from this particular topic for a little bit, so wanted to kind of catch up. Usually this is a time to catch up and find out what's going on. Bob, I'm real excited about what you're doing with the hidden capital with EY. I think that's, well, as you know, that's my interest, is in the whole intangibles and the hidden capital. And I'm kind of interested in what you guys are hearing from the capital markets about how they're integrating the intangibles, the intellectual capital, into their decision making. And one of the things I want your kind of get your take on is, have you seen Jonathan Haskell's new book, Capitalism without capital.
Actually, I have it ordered. It should be when I'm traveling. I ordered it on Amazon, so hopefully it's at my place.
I've been dying to talk to you about it, Ken. So,
Well, I broke down and bought it on a Kindle, actually on my iPad Mini. But when they start talking about the capital markets, they've essentially punted. They're saying that there's no way we're ever going to get intangibles as collateral in the debt market, and so we should all go to equities. And the way that we're going to solve this conundrum is just putting all the emphasis on equity ownership, kind of mini VCs, and that's the way we're going to solve the bringing intangibles in. So I just kind of, I may be a little harsh on John when I say that, but it sounds like they just kind of gave up. What do you see the capital markets doing with intangibles?
I can, if you want to start, I still need to read the books. I've read excerpts from it. Very interested. I agree that I thought it was a little bit of a punt. You know, and I'm an accountant, so I'm definitely not the expert in this area, but there's various benefits from a diverse group of investors, be them equity investors, be it debt investors, or be it VCs or private equity. I know there's a concern of the emphasis towards private equity away from the public markets. I know that's a big issue with the SEC and with Jay Clayton and the leadership there, and trying to make it maybe a little easier to register and get, you know, stuff like that. But I think it's important that we have a robust public market, but I think it's also important to have a debt market. And I know as an accountant, when you're thinking about a debt investor, one of their big things is liquidity, and they may look to the balance sheet and they may look to the liability of the balance sheet. Unfortunately, that's less than half of the story, being an accountant in my mind. And really what's issue is off balance sheet type items, and even off balance sheet type items with off balance sheet risk. And so I think a integrated reporting kind of aspect to that would be, I think, a good aspect or solution. And I agree with you that I took it as a little bit of an unnecessary punt, and I hope we never come to, if that's a suggestion, because we need the robustness of different type of investors. Try to just a couple of other comments is for integrating intellectual capital or that thought process. I don't think it's being, in my personal view, and I worked at Microsoft, it's not being done very well. And that's what we're kind of all about. And I think that's where we really got to get some momentum going. And that's why I'm so happy about the Hidden Capitals group. I'm going to repeat myself. Why I got involved in this was just my massive, why I got involved is I think we could have done a much better job at Microsoft of thinking about intellectual capital and human capital. I'll give you an example of our patent portfolio. For years, we thought of our patent portfolio as a legal portfolio. It would be a group of legal documents that we could sue others with, that we could try to halt them from coming to market. I think we woke up with the rest of the industry and said, that's not the way to do it. Really, with a patent portfolio, you should incorporate that in your products. And also, you should share some of that information with your peers and competitors for the greater good, and it actually turns out better for yourself. And then what I'm also excited about is the human capital, and that seems to be the real big area that I think may bust in getting exposure before the intellectual capital. And at this conference I was at, and I hear a lot of people talking, and maybe others want to comment on, is purpose. And what is the purpose of the organization? And what I've told people is, I'll read a company, and it seems like purpose is maybe replacing a company's mission and vision statement now. Now it's all about purpose. And what I tell people is, I read company's purpose statement, and then I look at their strategy, and I go, is this the same company? What's going on here? And so I think the purpose, and especially, I hate to say the new generation, but it's going to be very important for the new generation coming in of young people in the workforce, and it's important that companies to attract these people, is purpose is going to be a big deal to them, and they want to see it ingrained in the strategy. And what frustrates them more than anything is just hollow words on a piece of paper. So I'm really excited about the human capital. I think that's my thing, is the next thing to pop, actually, in my personal opinion.
Great. So please chime in. Others have questions, comments?
Yes, hello, Mary. This is Felipe Arango from BSD Consulting, and hello, Richard and Bob. It's great to thank you very much for laying the advancements that we're seeing in the field around the traction of integrated reporting. Just a brief introduction. We were IIRC's first foundation partner worldwide, and we've been working with the sustainability disclosures and sustainability strategies and sustainability investments for 20 years, and we're really excited to see IR coming becoming increasingly relevant for corporations in terms of the way in which they tell their story of value creation. And we're very confident that that increasingly the corporate players, as they see what counterparts across the world and as they see leaders in their sectors apply integrated thinking to identify value creation opportunities and to manage risk better, that will move on. One of my biggest concerns, and this I'm saying it also, I had a brief experience as an investment banking analyst in Wall Street, and it is that we still do not see integrated analysis. Corporations will move forward in telling the integrated thinking and integrated reporting story across, or value creation across capitals, but it seems that the analysts are still very much sending questionnaires and very much sending check boxes and very much not paying as much attention as they could to a concise story of value creation across capitals. And I wanted to hear your impressions, Richard, as to, and also Bob and Mary, as to the importance of also inoculating the circles of analysts. And it was great to see Larry Fink's commitment to integrated thinking in BlackRock's story, but how much does that really cascade to the analyst teams and those that are doing the assessments around risk and value creation, and a bit of what our plan collectively could be to deeply or to influence that community deeper. And also just one final aspect where it would be interesting to get your feedback on, and this is something that we discussed, Richard, briefly at the last IR conference, but there seems to be, both in Silicon Valley, which you mentioned, Bob, and across the B Corp movement and across the social enterprise movement, a very rich cohort of insurgents. So yes, we're trying the incumbents. We're going to try for the incumbents to tell their story of value creation across capitals, but also the insurgent business models. Some of them in the B Corp movement, others in the social enterprise accelerators. They, more than anyone, should be able to put forward the story of their business models in front of impact investors and pension investors. How can we also make sure that the IR wave or the IR movement doesn't leave the insurgents behind? So how can we integrate, how can we inoculate integrated analysis in a stronger fashion, but also how can we make sure that we don't leave the insurgents behind?
Okay, there's quite a lot there, Felipe. Let's have a go. Firstly, thank you for being one of our training partners, and I think for everyone on the webcast, part of how we're developing in the United States and the program that Bob's leading is through training. You're one of our training partners. We were with Boston College this morning here, who are one of our training partners, and we have others licensed throughout the United States. And it is part of the offer which is helping us to build integrated reporting. So thank you to BSD for what you're doing there. And of course, although the focus for this broadcast is the United States, we're global, and some of our partners, including those listening to this call, are helping us across the Americas. It's great, Nick, that you're with us from Canada, and I'm sure you know our good colleague Lisa French, who is such a brilliant part of our global team, but she's based in Canada, and I hope that you use her as much as possible within Canada. And of course, to you, Felipe, I recall that conversation. We're very strongly, as I said earlier, in both Brazil and Argentina, but you have both knowledge and contacts. We were talking about Colombia, weren't we, at the conference? And I've since made links with Mexico, and I think we need to to look at the next stages we're developing across Latin America. And I just want to acknowledge, welcome, and underline my interest in working with you on that as well. And thank you for your assistance. On the insurgent question, whether it's the B Corps, and we partnered with the B Corps in the big Inclusive Capitalism conference that took place US, UK and globally in London recently. Whether it's the social enterprises and social impact investment, you didn't mention, but cooperatives and mutuals. Again, there is a very, very clear case in terms of values for those to undertake integrated reporting. There's some brilliant examples out there, and we have written and we've held events aimed at those specific sectors, and we do partner with those. We're not fighting shy of the insurgents, and there's a good message to tell there, and something I wrote personally in terms of the cooperative and mutual sector last year. Please do feel free to draw on that. But we are for the mainstream. We want to make this the norm, and we mustn't be identified only with the insurgents. And that's why, of course, in the communications, including in this webinar, we emphasise the mainstreaming and the integrated nature of what we seek to achieve. And that brings me to what you say about financial analysts. I find as I go to our priority markets around the world, there's huge interest from the financial analyst community. The idea they don't get it or they're not interested, that's not the feedback and the anecdotal evidence I got. And a lot of them, let's face it, are young people, the millennials that Bob, you were just talking about, and they have this sort of natural mindset in terms of their vision of the world. What again we're seeking to do is to move out of simply the ESG space or the socially responsible investment space, where you have specialist financial analysts that are just looking at ESG factors and it's separate from the rest of the investment chain, to one where again this is part of mainstream integrated investment, and the financial analysts working on the mainstream portfolio are using a multi-capital approach, and there's good evidence that we're achieving that. So both in terms of the investor community, we've been talking even today again about Deutsche Asset Management, for example, First State Capital, for example, and here in the United States, State Street, who we've been with just this week, who are integrating across their funds, and they're not undertaking simple separate ESG investment approach. So that is changing, and I think that corporates need to see that. We all need to communicate that more effectively. And then does that translate back to individual financial analysts? Yes, it does. The Global CFA Institute has, within the last year, determined to become our global partner, to advocate integrated reporting, to introduce integrated reporting within its curriculum. And we were just talking yesterday, Bob, weren't we, with the CF Institute here in the United States about them doing a project which will show how you can do an integrated report within the 10K rather than outside it, which is going to be an extremely interesting project indeed. So I think it's the right challenge, Felipe, but it's one where I think we've got some very good answers.
Thank you. That's great to hear that that's happening at the global level. Hopefully, it will cascade to the CFA exams here in the US. But that's great to hear that partnership.
Great. We'd love to hear from. Oh, good, Nick.
Yeah, I've got a question. Great to see you, Richard and Bob and Mary. Hi again. One of the issues I think you talked about, Richard, was the importance of tying this back to materiality. And I think that, historically the IIRC has done quite a lot of work to try and raise this recognition of materiality. But one of the concerns I have, and one of the questions I've got for you, is in thought leadership, is that I still see many organizations failing to address, when they do their risk assessment, materiality relative to the 6 capitals. The reason I focus on this, if we look organizationally at two of the key capitals, human capital and relationship capital, they in fact are the most significant, they have the most significant impact on financial capital. So from a materiality point of view, when we look organizationally at the consumption of financial capital, for most organizations, the largest portion of day-to-day expenditure goes to pay for human capital. So from a materiality perspective, one would think that organizations would say, this is critical, this is material. The other thing is our incoming revenue stream, to a great degree, depends on relationship capital, whether we're selling direct to customers, whether we're selling through distributors, or however we build the relationships, not only on the customer side, but on the supplier side as well. So I would have thought when we talk about both the cash flow in and cash flow out, organizations would recognize that from a materiality perspective, focusing on the effective performance of these two capitals is absolutely critical to their organizational sustainability. And I think that's one of the messages we need to work on getting across, because I see a lot of investors not sure what questions to ask. And I think part of that is because we're still mired in the definition of materiality that is the traditional one, driven by sort of more the accounting risk, which doesn't take into account where the money's going operationally. So what are your thoughts on thought leadership in IIRC relative to sort of expanding the horizons of materiality to help us, both the investor community ask the right questions, but also management understand the linkage between traditional financial reporting and the use of the six capitals?
Well, the first response, a very simple one, is just to underline what Bob's already said about hidden capitals. Metrics exist for human capital, but they're human resource metrics that the human resource manager cares about, but the CEO or the CFO have got no idea how that plays back into value creation for the business and business strategy. And it's the connection, the materiality of that is missing. And so our message on that is the initiative that Bob's described that is going to be based here in the United States, where we want to fill some of those gaps. The second issue is this on materiality. Thank you for underlining it. It's crucial to integrated reporting, and it's important that everyone on this broadcast hears that. Some of the frameworks that are around reduce it to an equation, and we don't, frankly. Obviously, the integrated reporting framework is entirely principles-based. That's the approach, and we, though we don't reject those approaches if companies choose to use them. We think it is a question of management judgment, in that there's no shortcut to management deciding what it is that is successful for their own business and then sharing that with their own board and then with their investors. So we're careful not to reduce it simply to a mechanistic calculation that wouldn't in itself lend itself to materiality. But what we have done is recognise that companies are struggling with that, and it is some clarification would assist. And so again, as most people I hope are aware, last year we did the global feedback exercise on the application of integrated reporting, the first global consultation we've done since the framework was first published. It threw out some very good findings, for example, in terms of acceptance and awareness of integrated reporting, the fact that there was no demand to change the framework, but there was a demand to clarify some specialist areas where there were perceived difficulties in application or ambiguities or conflicts. One of those was materiality. And so we now have a 2-year technical program of advice and guidance, which is going to help us deal with those issues, materiality being one of them. So we're to come out with some more technical guidance that we hope will assist. And the last thing is this, as we haven't had a chance to talk about it yet, but the IIRC is trying to drive this global system change. Part of that is establishing a global corporate reporting dialogue, bringing together the major financial and non-financial standard setters. And under the umbrella of integrated reporting, they call the integrated report the umbrella, and they recognise that IIRC is the convener to be able to align and bring coherent the different financial and non-financial reporting frameworks. One of the things that we've already done is to have a common founding principle of materiality that doesn't just apply to the IIRC and the International IR framework, but applies to all of the frameworks. And then each of those frameworks together at their next iteration agreed to use that founding principle of materiality. I am absolutely delighted that the first framework who then did that was a financial standard setter, the International Accounting Standards Board. I'm not saying it's exactly a definition that's in that principle there, but it certainly influenced it and was a step towards it, and really was therefore very affirming that this is the future of corporate reporting and this is relevant to financial reporting, and is a very good example how our work on alignment and underlining that this has to be material to the business and to the aim of long-term value creation for the business is indeed the overriding and winning argument.
Yeah, Nick, can I comment a little bit about what you said is, first, the term materiality, and this is not in the context, and I use the term context again, in the context of the way you asked it, but I'll answer first is, I personally believe doing a definition or providing a definition of materiality, in my mind, is possible. It's contextual based. We can't do it. We can't even do it well in financial reporting, let alone in other areas. But I think what you're saying, and I agree with, and maybe the word that we should be using is materiality, since it's got so much baggage, because it's so contextual, and it's really what's important, what's a big deal, you know, loose words. But you said it on human capital and relationship capital, and I'm surprised, as being a businessman myself, I get shocked that we just haven't gotten it yet. And I don't know if it's our training and the way we were trained with such a focus on our financial capital, manufacturer capital, kind of that system. And things are changing and people are realizing it, but then they're just, well, what do I do about it? And I don't like one-off examples, but if you're looking about, and I'll turn to the term material, I don't think there's been a bigger material item to hit Facebook than the last couple of days of the impact on their relationship capital. And it's really their trust with their customers. And you can see that they have a big task on their hands now, is a trust with that is their business model. And that shows you how important relationship capital is, human capital. And I kick us ourselves as business people. I'm shocked we just haven't realized it as we should.
Value creation.
Hey, this is Asheen from SustainServe. This last couple of comments are really resonating with me in the work that we do on understanding the strategic direction of the CR programs for our clients. We often will interview many in the C-suite, and what I found, I think reflecting the previous comments, from my background as a business person and my background as a sustainability person, is that oftentimes the language that is used by folks, let's say like the CFO versus the CR department is, in some cases, is totally separate. In the financial sector or the financial offices, we're talking GAAP and FASB and various accounting rules and measurement that hopefully drives decision making based on purely financial metrics. And on the CR side, we're talking, what is it, IIRC or SASB or the Greenhouse Gas Protocol. And even when we use words like materiality, they are interpreted very differently. And so, I think that in order to start driving change that is reflective of all of the capitals, there's a yeoman's task to really create this awareness among non-sustainability professionals for the relevance of the sustainability topics, or let's say more broadly, social and environmental metrics and KPIs to that world. So I guess my question to you is, do we bring the mountain to Muhammad, or the other way around? I mean, do we start to try to promote things like greenhouse gas inventories and carbon footprints, or do we recast what we do in terms of business continuity risk, for example, or supplier disruption, or resource allocation risk, and kind of adopt the words and more importantly processes and metrics of existing business process.
I think, first of all, thanks again to Sustain Serve for your support for today, but also the very rich discussions that we have between us and the companies that you're working with in delivering integrated reporting. We are pretty strong in saying that this is for the business and for the investor and for long-term value creation. And it doesn't renege or downplay the importance of carbon, for example, if that's then translated into a language and a set of concepts that are meaningful in terms of the CFO, the analyst community, as we were talking about earlier, and the investor. You can argue that the whole history of integrated reporting comes from the fact that the sustainability movement saw that it could go so far and it could get really big support, but in terms of disclosure in some big companies who are leaders in the market, but in terms of making it the norm, falling a long way short of that, and that's why many of the sustainability people were behind the setting up of IIRC in the first place and remain part of our governance. So I don't think that it's an either or. I'd want to emphasise that. And I do think the CFA example that we gave earlier is a very good example where we're succeeding on that. Bob.
Just a little tongue-in-cheek, because you brought up, I'm not trying to be confrontational with you. I'm getting in my mind. I've always wanted to be like a Fox News analyst, where not just Fox, it could be CNN, where you actually get in the last word, because you can say something, make your point, and say, sorry, out of time, we got to go to a commercial break, so no one can rebut what I'm saying. And we're right at the end here, so you're probably not going to be able to rebut what I'm going to say. And I think it's more of what Richard is saying is, I think we've got to be, as a community, better in our articulation, and we got to be careful that it doesn't be perceived, in my personal opinion, as an ESG type of focus, or even the term sustainability of what we mean by that. And I'll go back to it was, I think, James Carville, who was the advisor for President Clinton, actually put on his wall, "It's the economy, stupid," and he had to look up at that every morning when he giving his advice to Clinton in his election or re-election was economy. Talk about that. That's what will get you elected. And I think I need to do the same to me. Is I got to put up on my wall multi-capitalism. It's multi-capitalism. And I think that is the discussion we really need to have. And sometimes I think we do ourselves a disservice of not riding that horse. But that's just me. We're about to go to a commercial break. Anyways, go ahead, Mary.
Yeah, so we are almost out of time. We're doing really good work with this community. We're thrilled to have the support of Richard and Bob. They're here in Boston. We'll keep bringing them back and having more conversations. I just want to let people know we are going to have Clorox this summer to talk about their integrated report. ArcelorMittal has a U.S. report we're going to talk about. And as I mentioned, we're going to sit down with Mike Cruz and hear about what they did to create the ExxonMobil integrated report for them. So kind of a fun, provocative approach they're taking. I always hate to cut these off because I feel like there's so much more we can say, but I want to respect people's time. But I do want to thank you so much for coming. And thanks to everybody online. And, everything you can do to help us. As Bob said, we can have 100 people on these calls, and we can, have hopefully a bigger and bigger ripple effect over time. So look forward to working with all of you, and please stay in touch. And if you have ideas about what we can do and how to grow this, we're totally open to feedback.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.
And it's a privilege to be part of this.
Thank you, Mary.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.